Hello everybody, welcome back to another podcast. So It Chapter 2 finally arrived in theaters after I believe 2 years. Let's see how that movie did at the box office. Alright, so let's jump right in. Coming in at number 1 is It Chapter 2. The movie pulled in, the movie opened to 91 million over the weekend. This is a movie that I said could probably open somewhere around 100 million or so because, the movie surprised everyone when it was released back in 2017. It opened to 123 million, which is the largest opening in September. It went on to become the highest grossing R-rated horror movie ever of all time, right? 700 million worldwide, and the budget's only 35 million, mainly because they starred a bunch of kids, no names, to use the industry speak, right? Unknowns. And the second movie, Chapter 2, focused on the kids when they're all grown up. They turn into Jessica Chastain, James McAvoy, Bill Hader, Bill Skarsgård return as the clown Pennywise. So they're back. And this movie reviews is actually lower than the first movie. 86% for the first movie, 63% for the second movie, and a B+ cinema score. And as we expected, the sequel opened lower than the first movie, and first movie opened to 123 million. I said it's gonna be lower because rarely would a sequel open higher than the first movie, but we just don't know how much lower, right? I guess industry were projecting the movie to open somewhere between 90 to 100 million. Some would say 80 to 90 million or so. Even New Line or Warner Brothers, the company who released the movie, was expecting a 85 million opening, in kind of a pessimistic projection. But I thought 100 million is kind of fair for a sequel, but it actually opened lower, 91 million for the sequel, for Chapter 2. But the 91 million opening is actually within industry projection. The budget for the movie is somewhere around 60 to 70 million supposedly. So this 91 million is actually pretty good for this budget. Let's see how it did overseas. Overseas, it put in 94 million for a worldwide total of 185 million. And since It Chapter 2 is not released in China, it's missing a huge chunk there. China has a problem with supernatural movies, ghosts and all. So that's why it's not released there. So with a Rotten Tomatoes score of around 63% and a B+ cinema score, I expect It Chapter 2 to drop, in the high 50s, if not in the 60s in the second weekend. But we'll see come the next weekend. Alright, number 2 is Angel Has Fallen, the third movie in this Fallen series, starring Gerard Butler as FBI agent who, is there to protect the president, played by Morgan Freeman. And in its third weekend, it dropped 49% to pull in 6 million at the box office. Domestic gross is about 53 million, and let's see, hasn't opened overseas yet, so that's the box office for now. The budget for the movie is 40 million, so it looks like it's gonna do relatively okay here, but it's gonna pull its weight when it opens overseas. From the way the movie is going so far, it looks like Angel Has Fallen will probably finish its run ahead of London Has Fallen. London Has Fallen closed out at around 62 million at the domestic box office or so, and it looks like Angel Has Fallen will probably surpass that, will most likely surpass that number, probably in a couple more weeks. So depending on how it does overseas, Angel Has Fallen is probably not going to be the last movie in this Fallen series. Alright, number 3 is Good Boys, the R-rated comedy starring a couple of teens who try to learn the ins and outs of what to do when they go to this party that they're invited to, right? In its fourth weekend, it pulled in about 5.4 million, a drop off of about 43% from the previous weekend. Domestic gross is about 67 million, and let's see how it did overseas. It hasn't opened that wide overseas yet, but don't expect huge number because it is a comedy. The cultural differences and all. It pulled in 15.7 million overseas for a worldwide total of 82.5 million so far. It's actually doing pretty well since the budget's only about 20 million. Number 4 is Disney's Lion King. It's actually continue to do well. They pulled in 4.2 million over the weekend, a nearly 40% drop from the previous weekend. Domestic gross is 529 million here, right? And overseas, 1 billion for a worldwide total 1.6 billion. The budget is high, but at 260 million. But hey, the return is huge. Number 5 is Overcomer. It is the faith-based film, sort of. That's based on a book, I believe, or a true story. One of those things. Is from the producers who brought us War Room, and this is one of these movies that continues to linger in theaters. In its third weekend, it pulled in 3.8 million, and domestic total is about 24.7 million. Then I'm not sure if it'll open overseas. Probably not. But the budget is only 5 million, so it's actually doing pretty well. Number 6 is the Fast and Furious movie Hobbs Shaw, the spin-off starring Dwayne Johnson and Jason Statham. In the 6th weekend, it pulled in 3.7 million, a drop-off of about 42% from the previous week. It lost some theaters, like 600 theaters because of it. And let's see, domestic gross is 164 million so far, and overseas is doing very well, 556.7 million for a worldwide total of 720 million. But considering that this is a spin-off, it's actually doing pretty well. I mean, despite the rumored tension between Dwayne Johnson and Vin Diesel, they could potentially team up again, in a mainline Fast and Furious movie sometime down the road. Money is there for them if they want to come together, and this one proves that Dwayne Johnson and Jason Statham can carry this franchise forward should Vin Diesel and the other cast and crew member decide not to show up for future movies. Number 7 is the indie movie, The Peanut Butter Falcon. This is his 5th weekend in expanded release. It pulled in 2.3 million over the weekend. Drop-off is about 25% from the previous weekend. Domestic gross is about 12.3 million. This is a movie about a kid with Down syndrome who ran away from a nursing home, and he encountered an outlaw played by Shia LaBeouf. You don't remember him? And they bonded and they went on an adventure together. And LaBeouf's character teaches the kid how to I guess live life, enjoy life. That's free from what society decided that he could or could not do, right? Because of his illness. This movie is well reviewed, 95% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's one of these indie movies that plays to the more mature audience. People not looking for action, adventure, etc. Pretty much a heartwarming story, and this one is it. That's why it's staying in theaters, and it popped up this week in the top 10 because it's relatively weak weekend, despite it making the most of the money, taking most of the money from the box office. So that's why we're seeing Peanut Butter Falcon popping up in the top 10. But despite that, right, even if it is not in the theater, it grows more than some of the higher, more profile movies, which we will get to right now. Alright, number 8 is the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which is based on a book. This movie is actually doing surprisingly well. It pulled in 2.3 million over the weekend, a little bit less than Peanut Butter Falcon, but when the actual number comes in, it might potentially make more than Peanut Butter Falcon. So who knows, their rankings could potentially switch when the actual number comes in. But right now with the estimate is number 8. Drop off is about 55% from the previous weekend, and domestic gross is about 62 million, and the budget is only 25 million. So yeah, it's just doing pretty well. Let's see how it did overseas. Overseas, it pulled in 26.7 million for a worldwide total of 88 million. Yeah, this movie is produced by Guillermo del Toro, released by CBS Films, who usually do these genre movies like horror movies. A movie I expected to open somewhere between 5 to 10 million, but actually opened way higher than that, open to about nearly 21 million. So, and it continues to stay in theater. So yeah, it's actually doing pretty well. Number 9 is a dark comedy, Ready or Not, about a newlywed couple. The groom's family is, play this game where the bride has to survive a night of being, hunted by the rest of the family, and they try to kill each other, right? So this is a movie that they could probably open somewhere into the 5 to 10 million range, but it actually opened to about 8 million. So it's projections right on, pretty much there. Let's see. In its third weekend, it pulled in 2.2 million, a drop off about 62% from the previous weekend, which is actually pretty high, right? Domestic gross is about 25.6 million, but hey, it has a budget going for it. The budget is only 6 million, so even though the domestic gross is low, the budget is also low. And let's see how it did overseas. Overseas, it pulled in 13.3 million for a worldwide total of 39 million. So yeah, all in all, it didn't make a big splash at the box office, relatively speaking, but the relative low budget, makes it a pretty successful movie at the box office. Alright, let's close out the top 10 with Dora and the Lost City of Gold. In its fifth weekend, it pulled in about 2.2 million. Again, they have a couple K separating, the bottom few movies. Let's see, dropped off about 47% from the previous weekend. Let's see, domestic gross is about 54.2 million. Let's see how it did overseas. Overseas, it put in about 28.2 million for a worldwide total of 82.4 million. So budget is around 50 million or so. This is a kiddie movie that I thought would probably do well because of its brand name, right? Dora, it's a pretty popular children's movie, but this one, Dora and the Lost City of Gold, I believe, tend to be, target toward the older crowd, it feels to me. And maybe that's why the box office performance is not as huge as I thought it would be, but maybe people were waiting to watch it on home video. Alright, so that's it for the box office top 10. Let's move on to the new releases this weekend. We're going to have two white ones, the Goldfinch and Hustlers. Let's start off with the Goldfinch. It is a small indie drama starring Nicole Kidman, Finn Wolfhard, and Sarah Paulson, among others. It is based on Donna Tartt's novel of the same name. It's about a man who lost his mother at a bombing at a museum, and that event influenced, while he was a kid. And that event influenced him into adulthood, and how that event affect him into adulthood. Again, stars Finn Wolfhard, a relative unknown, and with the names Kidman, Wolfhard, Paulson, you can tell that this is not a star-driven movie. It's not gonna turn out the audience in huge numbers. Reviews-wise, it's not actually that great, right? I don't think it has that many reviews yet, but what's available does not paint a pretty good picture, right? 31% right now at Rotten Tomatoes, and these small indie movies depends on reviews and word of mouth, to pull them in. So how will this movie do? It'll probably open somewhere around 3 million this weekend. Alright, up next is probably the bigger movie of the two new releases, and it's called Hustlers. This movie stars Jennifer Lopez, Constance Wu, Julia Stiles, Keke Palmer, Usher, among others, right? It's based on a New Yorker magazine article about, strippers who drug their patrons and then, rob them. People might say, hey, isn't that Cardi B's, life story? No, that's another thing. That's another event. This movie, has the look and feel of like the previous movie earlier this year, that was released earlier this year, like Widows and The Kitchen, except, with the strippers where, women, the opposite sex, turn to crime to solve their monetary issues. Right now, it's relatively well reviewed. It's actually very well reviewed at Rotten Tomatoes, and although they don't have that many reviews, there's only about 15 or so reviews or something like that. But 95% on Rotten Tomatoes. But to me, from watching the trailer, right, I haven't seen the movie, but to me, it seems like it's an okay movie, a good diversion if you're looking for a movie that stars Jennifer Lopez, Constance Wu, Julia Stiles as strippers. Maybe this movie is for you. Interesting diversion, but is it enough to bring people out to watch this movie? Maybe not, right? Taste might have changed, right? Because Jennifer Lopez's peak has passed. Constance Wu, she has this big movie early this year in Crazy Rich Asian, or was it last year? In any case, right? It was a couple of months ago. Crazy Rich Asian, and she has this popular TV show, Fresh Off the Boat, in which she is very reluctant to return to if you read her tweets. So yeah, the actors here are past their prime, or that they're not mainstream enough yet to pull in huge numbers at the theatrical box office. But this concept might be enough to pull in maybe the woman audience and the teen the teen young teen crowd, right? Men in particular, right? I mean, make no mistake, Jennifer Lopez is the top headliner in this movie, but her recent movies didn't open huge. For example, The Boy Next Door back in 2015 opened to 15 million. Second Act back in 2018 opened to about 6.5 million. There's some voice works in animated movies which did really well, but that's her voice, but this movie is actually her. So Hustler is probably going to open somewhere in the same ballpark, right? Maybe except higher. Like I say, the concept has potential to draw in, bigger numbers than those movies. So I expect the Hustlers to open somewhere between 10 to 15 million this weekend. All right, that's it for this podcast. Tune in next week to see how I did. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.